I
Okay.
listened to our episode today and then the bonus
Excuse
episode
me.
because I was listening to I hadn't listened to both. And suddenly I want a pint of ice cream and all of the foods that we mentioned in it. I'm like, I need some cereal too. Diet sabotagers.
Hello and welcome to Table for Five with No Reservations. Take a seat at the table for a fresh, sweet, salty, tart, and pleasantly bitter conversation.
In this series, we will be discussing the parts of autism that happen behind closed doors. We wanted to take an extra moment to warn you that this may trigger some, but it's our intent to gently, boldly, and honestly face a few of these topics head on, as we always do. We are five brave women sharing from the safety of the community that we worked hard to build. We work to break the stigma and share our insight about how topics like aggression, eloping, and self harm affect our families. Our highest goal is to share so that moms like us feel less alone, and so that if this resonates and their voice shakes too much to share, that they can share ours. We appreciate your love and understanding. We hope that people feel validated by our stories. And we just want to make sure that you feel less alone. This is not an episode for little ears. With that, we're going to jump right into it. Tonight, I have Tabitha Cabrera,
Hello.
Jamie Ramos,
Hello.
Jen Dunn,
Hi, everyone.
Kim McIsaac,
Hey there.
and I am Rachel Flanagan. Thank you for joining us. We are not professionals. This is just a lived experience view from, life behind closed doors. This is our episode about aggression specifically. And I thought we would start with just kind of a quick fire for each of us. I wanted to ask how comfortable each of you are sharing this part of your life, whether it's actually things that have happened or, sort of your biggest fears with those around you. Jane?
I'm not big on sharing aggression. I don't even really talk to you guys a lot about
Mhm.
aggression. And I'm not afraid or anything like that. I do it kind of out of respect for my son, because for us, I feel like when there's aggression is when he's the most vulnerable, and it's
Mhm.
when he is having the hardest time. I don't feel like anyone's exploiting that, but I don't like necessarily talking about it all the time. I am open, obviously, to this discussion tonight and
Mhm.
talking about it. But for me personally, I don't talk a ton about aggression, but I do like to validate that it does happen in our home, and that I know it happens for a lot of people, and that it isn't anything to be ashamed of. My reasoning all for, again, not talking about it a ton is my son, and just out of respect for him. And I'm not saying anyone is disrespecting their child by talking about it,
Yes,
but
yes,
that's just
yes.
how it is. That's just how it is for me.
That's beautifully put. How about you, Jen?
I think how I share has changed. When I sort of first started blogging about it, I didn't have a lot of filter about what was happening. I shared, I think, maybe a little too open about things. Now I lean a little bit more towards what Jamie does. I don't always talk about it if there is a little bit now in the home. She's 13. She is on
Mhm.
social media. Her peers are on social media. Her teachers see it. I
Yeah.
feel like I feel like that for her now is sort of for her privacy. I think I've changed how I share about it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's cool that we're willing to have this discussion and keep their dignity and privacy in mind, but to
Yeah.
be vulnerable about it. So I thank you guys. How about you, Tabs?
I'm similar to Jamie. There's certain things that I shy away from sharing about for my kids' sake. They're both young. The trajectory of social media and the way that kids engage with each other, the way that families can find us. We live in a small town now. There's just certain things that I don't, for their sake, don't feel it's my privilege to really speak about. I wouldn't want someone talking about my hardest days openly without my permission, is how I view it, kind of. And, you know, a lot of the landscape of my writing is about my experience with
Yeah.
this whole setting. And so I generally, not just aggression, but I generally try and keep it in the landscape of how our life affects me and, the growth of my kids and that kind of thing. So that's the space of my writing. Also, I'm an attorney, so I'm always cautiously thinking about things being in writing. I mean, I'll
Yes.
always have that in the background. And I think we have seen some people we know or friends of ours or whatever, that something gets out and then something is misconstrued, should I say,
Mm.
not gets out, but is misconstrued, and then it can create something in the background that's even more affecting their lives,
Mhm.
than anything else. So just for privacy's sake, I guess, for my kids' sake.
How
It's
about you,
hard.
Kim?
Well, I want to clarify the question. Are you asking how comfortable you are talking about it in general or sharing it on social media? Because I feel like those are two extremely different questions.
You can answer both ways because I kind of mean how often do you bring it up and how comfortable are you and what is the sort of lens that you're bringing to the table tonight? Because I feel it's important because so many moms don't talk about it. So many moms want to protect their kids. Like all the topics that we've just quickly discussed are real for so many people. So I just kind of wanted to let our listeners know sort of where we're coming from in regards to aggression specifically because it's such a big deal.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so for me, I feel like it's something that's really changed over the course of the years as the aggression has changed as well. I feel like when she was young, when she was like under 5, I feel like aggression is more normalized because typical kids can be aggressive as well. Kids hit, they push.
Hmm.
I run a daycare. I see it all. They bite, they pull hair. Yes, with our kids, even at the young age, it can be a little more excessive and sometimes a little more intensified, but it's still kind of within the realm of like, it's not that weird that a 2.5-year-old pushed another 2.5-year-old, or it's not that weird that
Sure.
they pulled their hair. So I feel like in those ages, it wasn't as stigmatized, I guess.
Mhm.
Mhm.
So talking about it, sharing with people that worked with her, that, you know, were around was fine. As we got into the age where like it's not as expected, which would I feel like is like after 5, and
Yeah.
where it's, sometimes Alyssa had aggressive issues with, sometimes people in the community. It wasn't even like just in our homes. That was really hard. And then that got hard to talk about because A, you don't want people to look at your child like in some sort of way. B, you don't want people to like reflect on your parenting because they do. Um, you don't want your child viewed in this like negative light or as like,
Mhm.
something bad, or
Yeah.
there's a lot of shame I feel like that goes with aggression. People you cannot understand what it's like to have a child with aggression
Mhm.
unless you live it or you live right beside it because you
Oh,
just can't fathom it, you can't understand it. So I think that makes it very hard to share with people because there's a big huge judgment that comes along with it. When we got to the point that it got so hard that I had to reach out for help. And I feel like when you're in the thick of things like this, it's almost like Jamie said. I know her was saying because she feels like Jesse's vulnerable, but you're just going through it. You're just going through it. You're trying to get through
Mhm.
the day. You're trying to get through the chaos that it ensued for everybody, whoever it was, whether it was towards you, another child, whatever's happening. It's like by the time you get through all that, you want to put it behind you. It's almost like you don't want to now go and rehash it. And especially if you're in a phase where you're having a lot of aggression, that maybe it's every day or, you know, several times a week. I don't know. I feel like the last thing you want to do sometimes when you're not having to deal with that is like then go and talk about it. Like it's just really hard. Now I'm to the point where Alyssa still does have some aggression. I want to talk about it because I know the shame and the guilt that other people feel about it. So I think it's important. Of course, on social media, I think you're obviously going to be careful what you share, how you share it, in what
mhm.
form you share it. Like maybe you're not gonna take a picture of them being aggressive of somebody. Like that's not something that I'm gonna do, but like I might talk about it, in a writing piece just because I feel like it's important for people to know, and people that know that this happens in other people's households, that this is something that other people go through, so they don't have to feel the shame and the guilt and be afraid to seek out help.
Right. Yeah.
I know that was a
I,
long answer, but
That's
Kimmy, you said something about people like wouldn't know if this, and I've always said I wouldn't have understood it had I have not lived this, right?
yeah.
So I try to remember that, and I've said it a million times. It's kind of one of the things I always say is sometimes you don't tell maybe somebody like you would sit down and tell a friend something because it literally sounds like you're exaggerating. People couldn't imagine what comes from our little people.
Yeah.
It just sounds wild, the stories. So sometimes I feel like I keep things to myself for that reason, because like Kimmy said, it's just exhausting already. You're just exhausted by it all, that
Yeah.
there's no energy to try to explain it to somebody who isn't going to understand the depths of it, you know?
Yeah.
Well, and there's always the element of fear of like how someone's gonna react to your child, and then, you know, are they gonna
Respond in the
call
now or the future.
yeah, are they gonna call, you know, child services on you? Are they gonna report you to the school? Because they don't, you know, they don't it doesn't look normal. It does not look normal. Like if you see it out in the playground, like you know, it's like you almost wouldn't believe it. So it's like that's also another aspect that you kind of have over your head worrying about, you know, if it's something that's like out in public or something like that. So like I think that's also another hard component to it, because that's definitely something that I think goes through a lot of people's minds.
Mhm.
That's why I mean, I think it's important that we all answer that, and I will, but I really want people to know that this is such a varied response because we're all different people governed by different things. As moms, as people coming from where we have, going through what we've done, had, you know, like experience, but each of us is also closer and further from it with varied intensities at times. There's so many components and variables to it. So for me, I'm sort of leaning on the other side of things because in my family, I mean, I've talked about many parts of these pieces or parts and pieces along the way, but we've never really tied it together in one episode. So for us, we have documentation of really, really aggressive stuff already at CPS, and it's been closed. And I say that because I'm not the only one. We have documentation, a functional behavioral analysis, and a behavioral plan at school. We have plans, crisis plans with every social worker, with every therapist. We have documentation at every level. So I feel like I can say confidently that for us, it's important to share because I have to. If people don't understand more about what happens with a family like mine, we are just more vulnerable, whether we're on the side of the street because it happened in a car, or we're in a store and it happened with somebody having just like a retail Wednesday. Whether it's at school or it happens to us. So um, I'm proud to host this one. I'm proud to share. I don't feel I know that I can speak about what happens and keep the integrity of Celie's heart and spirit in mind. You know, all of what brings up aggression in our life is a result of stuff that Celie cannot control and that we're working to get a better handle on, which is why I can share shamelessly. Anyway, that's where we're coming from tonight. Okay, guys, so let's go a little bit deeper. What does it look like, or what are your biggest fears about this part of what happens behind our closed doors? Hey, Jane, what about you?
For us, aggression's been ongoing since he was little. I think, especially in the beginning, I mean, it's always for us, I feel like it comes from an emotional need, but really mostly in the beginning and still a little now, it's a communication and frustration for not being able to communicate a lot of the time. And so I always say when he was younger, it was just more out there. It wasn't directed towards anyone necessarily or anything like that. We
Or
never
like an
had,
outburst, not an attack. It's like an outburst.
yes, it was just like, you're in the way kind of a thing, or I can't control my body, which was incredibly hard. I think as a parent, watching your child struggle in any way is really hard, but especially a toddler when you in the beginning don't know what's going on and why this is happening. I felt like it was a communication thing, but I didn't really know that yet. I didn't understand all of that. And the really sad part for me looking back then on his beginning, even from the very beginning, he was a very colicky baby. He had like night terrors, a lot of
Mhm.
hard things to go through. Was like that he was just so uncomfortable in so many ways, and he had no way of expressing that
Yeah.
besides like letting it out, which I understand. I would too.
Yeah.
I do too sometimes. And so now as we get older, I will say we don't have as many aggression issues as I know a lot of people do, but we do have them. They come and go a lot of the time, and I think sometimes that's even harder because sometimes it's just like the moment something is triggered or comes back up, it's almost like a reminder of the really hard times, and then my mind goes like, "Oh, we're back to this," and "Oh no, this and this can happen." And sometimes it goes on for a long time, and sometimes it's one incident and that's it. I think when it comes to fears and all that, my son is pretty young right now. My fears all talking to a lot of moms who have boys on the spectrum. I know that it can often get worse with puberty with boys, and that really scares me because obviously he's going to get bigger and probably be taller than me and pretty short and things like that, which just make me sad for him. I think the hardest part for me with aggression is that he has to let things out in that way, that he can't control that himself. And I always say, the one thing I do say often about aggression to people is there's nothing and as painful in the world as your child going after you. It's heartbreaking for me and my husband. I feel like it kind of happens to my husband more than myself, but man, it gets me down immediately.
Yeah.
It's really hard. And you know it's because you're their safe place and it's really because they love you the most. But there's something about that when your child is looking at you and you're there and you love them more than anyone in the world. They love you more than anyone in the world. And aggression comes at you in some sort of way. It's incredibly hard to go through for us with a young child because, most people aren't dealing with that. And it's like you guys said, no one else really seems to understand or know what that's really like or what that means.
Thank you, Jane. Jen, how about for you?
Her stuff started right before kindergarten, kind of like not the age that you and Kimmy said, but it was the going out in public and the random shoving of people that we didn't know, kids to the ground, that kind of stuff. And that started right before school. I will say we had we've talked about it on here. We had a very challenging medication journey, which intensified the aggression to a level that only another autism mama could ever understand. So we've kind of come full circle with it. I want to knock on all wood possible in this world. I will say, and Kimmy's years ahead of me on this, with age comes, I feel like, some sort of control, learning to, not lash out at me. It's not her first instinct now, and I feel like that comes with the age a little, maybe. We don't have really, knock on wood, much of that these days.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's hard. And, for me, people could her people would say, well, you just need to get ahead of it.
Okay.
I have a better chance of blinking and be 100 pounds. So
Yeah.
let's just clarify that right now.
Well,
It's not really getting ahead of it. Those kind of things where people would feel like, well, she's just a kid.
yeah.
Right. So there, with that sort of condescending comments is a lot of heavy judgment when you're already
Feeling under.
feeling under the scope. And like someone said, there's nothing like the shame of or hurt feelings of your child hitting you. It just hurts your heart, So yeah, I think we're in a different place now, but I hope we keep staying there.
In
Yeah.
that track.
Yeah. I'd like to stay in this lane. It would be great. Yeah, that's where we're at with that.
Tabs, how about for you?
I'll say we have dealt with aggression. I have 2 kiddos in this house, and I think generally it's associated around, like what everyone else is saying, like inability to control. It's almost like there's no place for anything to go. Like the feelings are so large that there's no place or release or like I think when you're dealing with nonverbal kiddos, it's a lot of times associated around communication issues. And as they get older and they're still not able to communicate their needs the way they want to, it gets harder that way. it is one of the hardest aspects of this life, and to process. And, for me personally, I grew up in kind of a hard track of childhood. And so some of that stuff is already preset, some of the feelings around, like inability to control your surroundings for myself, and like not being able to bring it down. And I'm not generally a yeller or anything, especially with my kids. And so like having that energy of like that kind of energy is almost like jarring, in a way.
And triggering.
Yeah, and triggering. Yeah, for sure. I will say for me personally, in public is the hardest scenario for me to kind of process. And like, I feel like our house is a safe zone, and there's no eyes looking, there's no judgment. It's just, we're just dealing with whatever is happening. But once you get out into public, you have comments, you have people trying to, throw whatever your way. And it's just hard. It is hard. And it depends on what's happening. And sometimes my kids' energy, they bounce off each other. And so, like, if there's a lot of energy in the air, then it can flow to both of my kiddos in that way, which is really hard. I find it really, really hard. So, yeah, it's tough. And I think there's just no way to really like process all of that ever. It just is one of those things that you don't want to talk about. And if you do talk about it to your friends or whoever's close to you, if they don't have kiddos who struggle with these type of things, there's no right words that they're going to say.
Yeah.
There's not a sentence that comes after anything that is going to be right, even though they're trying really hard to support you or make you feel better or whatever the case may be. It's just tough. Ugh.
I agree.
Yeah, that's
It's heavy. It's
It's
big. Yeah. Kim, for you, what is your like current place or biggest fear looking a little deeper? Like
So
what
I
is it
mean,
like?
like I said, we've gone through a lot of phases of aggression. It's come and it's gone. Initially, she's always been aggressive, really, ever since her autism symptoms emerged. Her aggression hasn't really been towards us, really. Sometimes she does lash out at us, like in the midst of like a meltdown or a fit or something like that. But her aggression has more been towards her siblings. My son, for example, like when he was young, like if he even was like, "Mommy," and you know how they say it, "Mommy," and it is kind of annoying. I will give her that. I have the dark and twisted sense of humor because it's just the way that I've gotten through this life. It is annoying, right? Even in your head, sometimes you're like, "Oh," Alyssa just would react to that feeling. You know what I mean? So if he even said my name 2 times in a whiny voice, she would literally attack him. She would attack him. She'd claw him, like, and keep
Yeah.
going at him like a tiger. Like, it's not like you know, I feel like when you say, "Oh, she scratched him," "Oh, she pinched him," it's not like it doesn't stop. I used to have to send him down in the basement. Like he would have to go downstairs. They had a playroom down there. He wasn't, in a cell or anything. But I'd have to send him down into the basement and he'd have to stay downstairs because she couldn't tolerate his voice. She couldn't tolerate him near me. And at that time, Neil had worked 2 jobs, sometimes 3. So majority of the time it was just me and the 2 of them, which she was like 2 to 3 and he was like around 5. Heartbreaking. Are you sending your 5-year-old away from you on a different floor? And that's what I had to do to protect him. At that time though, she was at least physically manageable where I could swoop her up, I could pick her up, I could stop her, I could bring her in a different room. I mean, that's a huge difference when you're dealing with aggression. It's still hard, but you can kind of physically manage it. But then what happens when they get a little bit older? She had a phase that lasted about a year where she went after kids in the community. And no warning. This is the thing. Stay ahead of them, Jen. Like Jen's advice was, yep, that's what you literally have to stay ahead of them. You have to try to predict and try to be on top of them every second. But the thing is, like, she could go 3 weeks with no aggression. So then your guard's down and boom. And we figured out after a year that her trigger was anytime a child whined or cried, she would go after them anywhere. So like if somebody was like at the playground whining to their mom, she would go after them. But it's scary. If she's somewhere where there's a slide, they can get knocked downstairs, they can get knocked down a slide. I mean, it is really, really intense and scary. And especially it's horrible with your own children, don't get me wrong. It was heartbreaking the things that have happened. But at least those are my own kids and I can kind of deal with the repercussions of that. This is somebody out strangers. And she's like 7 go, and she might be going after a 5-year-old or 4-year-old, and people aren't understanding that, like, she's not a typical 7-year-old. She doesn't understand. It got really, really hard. We almost couldn't bring her into the community at that point. I couldn't bring her out alone. We had to have 2 people, and you just never knew when it would happen. And that was really tough. We, end up getting through that. And it's like someone else said, it comes and it goes, but it's hard because when it comes, it's intense. It's your guard's up, you're on it. But then when it goes, you kind of breathe that sigh of relief, and then it comes back, and it's just like, I mean, it's like PTSD. It just hits you. It just hits you. And we went through a time of the worst aggression that she had when she was 12. This lasted probably 9 months to a year, came out of nowhere. We hadn't really had any aggression in a few years. And when I say we haven't had any aggression, I have to clarify this to people. That doesn't mean we didn't have any aggression. That just means we didn't have any consistent aggression. Of course, there were times that something would happen and she would get set off and she would lash out. And a majority of the time, it was just her lashing out, unable to control herself, and like whoever happened to be in her realm at that time. Honestly, a lot of the time, it was my daughter, Kara. She got the brunt of the aggression, and she like loves Kara the most. So, I don't know. You hurt the ones you love. I don't know. I think honestly, Kara showed her fear more. And I think so that was why she more or less went to her. And a lot of times she didn't hurt her. It would be pushing her on the ground or like ripping a blanket out of her hands. But like, she was 6 and Alyssa's 12. That can be kind of scary. And then all of a sudden aggression started, meltdown started, all these behaviors came back, and it was really bad. Like, there was a time I had to send my 2 children that were 4 and 6 into their bedroom and have them lock the door behind them. Run, go in your room, lock the door. Because Alyssa would not stop. I mean, she'd go. She was like a dog with a bone. She would not stop. She one time tried to kick the door through. I mean, she splintered the door with her foot. She was so determined to get in the room and get them. My son had to, people will probably come at me, but he had to literally tackle her to the ground and hold her
Yeah.
down
Yeah.
to stop her. Like, she was going through a goddamn door to attack a 4 and a 6-year-old when she
Mhm.
was 12 years old. And no, she didn't mean it, and she didn't understand what she was doing. You know what I'm saying? But still, you could really hurt somebody accidentally. A push can really hurt somebody. If a push
Mhm.
happens to be at the top of stairs, or they're standing on something, or it's just, it got really, really bad. And, we did end up having to contact the school. I needed help. Like, I didn't know what to do. One day I'm sitting there, I'm holding the door closed to her room. I'm crying. They're crying. She's crying. Like, it was madness. And it's like, no, you don't want to talk about this because I got a
It's like
12-year-old.
trauma in action.
Well, I got a 12-year-old going after a 4 and a 6-year-old. You know what I mean? That
Yeah.
in all aspects, I need to protect, yes, I need to protect my young children, but I also need to protect my 12-year-old daughter with special needs. You know what I'm saying? So it's like
Mhm.
everybody needs the equal protection. And somebody from the outside might not look at it and say, oh, well, she's autistic. She doesn't understand. And obviously, it's not like an excuse. We obviously, this is just, it is what it was. Like, that's
Mhm.
how we were living at that time. And, I just remember sitting there thinking, I don't know if I can keep doing this. Like, I don't know what to do. And the school came in and they sent a behaviorist in, and she got a slot for DDS, which here in Massachusetts is very hard to get for a child. They came in immediately and were like, you need help. And they did social stories, and we did all kinds of things, and it did lessen. And I think eventually we tracked it down to, it was really a bad reaction to the antibiotic shots that she had taken, because the behavior started immediately after that. But it doesn't really matter why, honestly, because it's like when it's
Yeah.
happening, you really can't pinpoint why, especially when you have a child who's nonverbal and can't communicate. And then her aggression has lessened. Definitely, I think after she turned 14, we've seen a huge dip in behaviors in general. Meltdowns, aggression, all that stuff really decreased. Not to say that it doesn't happen, because it still happens, but not as often. During the shutdown, COVID shutdown, I mean, we saw a
Mhm.
huge spike. We hadn't had aggression in a long time, and it came back, and it was
Yeah.
pretty bad, and then Kara was the target most of the time, and it came out of nowhere. And not having to deal with that for so many years, and then having that come back. And now, God, I don't know how old Alyssa was, 23 maybe. She's a 230-pound woman.
Mhm.
Physically, she's a woman going after Kara, who's like 115 pounds and 5'3", and Alyssa's 5'7" and like 230 pounds. So there's a
Mhm.
huge size and weight difference there, and she never like hurt her to the point that it would just be like she'd lay on top of her, she'd push her, might pull her down. But emotionally, that is also in Kira,
Yeah.
I think because it's happened to her so many times when she was younger as well, I think it's very like traumatic for her. You know what I'm saying? And then of course then she shows that fear, and then Alyssa then just then it just goes more and goes
Our
more. And
kids sniff that fear.
they
They
do. And
know
I
it.
have to say, as she's gotten older, she's become a lot more aware. So like she will now, she'll feel bad and she'll say sorry, but when she was younger, she did not feel bad. There was no I don't think she understood to have remorse. It wasn't like,
Right. It's
I know,
not
I mean, that
malicious.
makes her sound like terrible, but like it's not like she just didn't understand. And
Mm.
now she understands that she did something that caused someone else to be hurt or caused someone else to be upset. Like she can, and then so now she's upset, she's crying, Kira's crying. Like it's like,
Mhm.
and you want to go to the child that's hurt, but like Alyssa's also not understanding.
Escalated.
Yeah, she's upset that Kira's hurt, even though like she's the one who did it. And it's just like this whole vicious cycle, and it's hard because you want to say that you're this patient, understanding, loving mom, and like I am, but you're hurting my baby. You're hurting my other child. So that pisses me off, even though you're also my child. It's very conflicting. And like now Kira has to come out and accept her apology, and she probably doesn't want to do that, but like she
Mhm.
understands that like Alyssa needs that to move on,
To
you
shut
know.
it down. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's like now she has to come out and like accept the apology, let her hug her, and then she'll say sorry. She'll just keep, which is great that she has that understanding now.
Yeah.
And most of the time it's more of like a threat of doing it now. She doesn't like act, she doesn't actually do it. It's pretty rare. She does more stuff like she actually had a huge meltdown tonight. Kara's back home, guys. COVID's hit the McIsaacs again, and Alyssa's not a fan of Kara being back from school at all. And she was very clear. And we've had a jar of salsa get thrown. We had salsa and chips everywhere. Chairs flipped over. I mean, it was,
Oh,
Yeah,
she's not hurting
tough.
anybody. This is
Yeah.
just the way the anger and like frustration manifests now. So like,
yeah.
of course, that's much better than in the past when it was aggression. It's still not fun. But and then Neil had to kind of get her. He had to get her into her room, and she was like refusing. So then, it looked like he was literally like trying to get a black bear into a bedroom. Like I'm not even kidding. She's flailing. She's sitting down. She's the bag of chips flew all the way across one side of the house to the other. But it manifests different. It's not
Yeah.
quite as severe. It's not quite as, she's not harming anybody. It's more, not to say that she couldn't, because like there could be a time or a day when you're not expecting it that it
Aggression
happens.
in the
But
home is the next door neighbor to aggression with people in the home. Like
mhm, mhm,
that's the
yeah.
trajectory,
But
period.
yeah, so that's kind of like what we've dealt with in a nutshell. I'm able to bounce back a lot quicker now,
Yeah.
maybe in the past 5 years than I was before, because it really does take a toll. And you're really torn, especially with somebody who's dealing with siblings. I'd rather her hurt me any day of the week than hurt one of the other kids. It's really hard, and they don't understand,
And
it's
then
just
even when they
really
do
tough.
understand, it's still a lot. I mean,
Yeah.
truly, it's a lot for Kira today.
I mean, Lexi doesn't even like the yelling, so it's hard.
I think that's the point of this. Like autism behind closed doors is hard. And it's not just hard for Alyssa in the case of these examples right now. It's hard for the family. It's
Well,
hard.
and that's the thing.
It
So
is.
that's the thing. It affects the whole entire family, and I think that
Mhm.
is one of the things that I'm very big in talking about, because people don't always see that. They don't see the effect on the siblings. They don't
You're right.
understand how much it affects them. They don't understand how much it affects the parents, the marriage, the whole family dynamic, and
Mhm.
of course, the autistic child. Of
Of
course,
course.
compassion, empathy for
Yeah.
Alyssa, 100%. You know what I mean? We want to help her through any of this stuff any way we can. Sometimes in the moment, you need to take a little heartbeat and like remind
Yeah.
yourself of that, because it's hard to do that when you're seeing these behaviors and you're seeing people hurt and stuff like that. But and that's okay to say. Like I have no shame in saying that. Like,
Yeah.
and I think this is the thing that people feel bad, like they feel like they're whining, they feel like they're, exploiting their child. It's like, no. It's like you're just talking about it. You need to process it. You need to be able to talk about the way that this life affects you. Otherwise, you bottle it up and then you become angry and bitter.
And I think you're saying that from the side of I've lived through how I handled it first, and now this is how I can say you have to have somebody.
Yeah,
My
and I'm
next
saying in
question,
whatever way you're
my,
comfortable. I'm not saying you have to go
of
on
course,
social media and talk about it if you don't want to. Of course, you don't have to do that. I'm even
my
saying
next
just
question is,
talking about it to anybody.
yeah, my next question is for kind of the best advice so we can think about that. But I want to quickly answer for myself. I feel like our place in where we are and our fears for what's coming are sort of a different, well, it's been a pretty intense process here in Planaville. Right now, I would say that Sealy has many different varieties of aggression, like you heard in Kim's, there's a difference between like aggression within the home, throwing stuff, throwing chairs, flipping, versus aggression with the people in the home or people in the community or people at school or, like there's just these different varieties of how aggression would impact dependent on where it happens and like who's involved. For us, there is only really one area of Celi's life where she isn't aggressive. But even within that context, when she's aggressive with other people, it looks wildly different if it's caused by something that she's been anxious about versus something when she's super, super triggered on a Thursday after a long week during a depression, state after not sleeping. I mean, when it is like shit upon shit and worse upon worse and hard on top of hard with like a sprinkle of worse shook in, that is going to be different than like a crow going off at the same time as a cloudy day after she had to slam on the brakes in the van and her apps aren't working and she takes out a bus driver. Like it's just all going to be different, but it happens everywhere. So I think it's important for me to say that whether it's sweeping a table, clearing a classroom, kicking a cop in the shin, being too aggressive within her body with like, a wiffle ball bat at Miracle League, again, a totally safe and controlled environment, but just it's all going wrong. It is not her fault. And it is completely tied back to every time. Like there's probably an antecedent. It might be the crow, it might be the whatever, the wrong seat in the bus, it might be my face. I mean, it could be a lot of things, but she cannot do better. And so I have spent a lot of time trying to accept that our path will have aggression in it. And I've learned, as I said at the beginning, that in a life like ours, where aggression is sort of the lane consistently, it's more just how intense it is or not, that paperwork is always the thing that will help get you actual help. And so we really have learned stuff like physical holds for my daughter. She goes to a level 4 school, which in Minnesota means that she has a ton of support because she gets aggressive everywhere. She has an independent bus because she can take out a driver and an aide at the same time. It has affected every facet of our life. It affects every part of her life. It affects every relationship that we do and don't have, and every single place we can go or not go. It means leaving the door. It means the sidewalk. It means the car. It means who we're going to, how loud it's going to be, what it's going to smell like. It's everything. And you can't govern all of that.
And it's consuming because it
really
isolates you to a
Mhm.
level that most don't understand.
And not
Well,
only isolates, but like I have to be so keyed up and so hyper vigilant that even if it's going well, I cannot breathe. I cannot get tree parts in my eye. I cannot look away. What aggression means to me is a life of where safety is in the balance constantly. Because when it starts, I don't know how big it's going to get. Are we going to end up running in front of the highway? Like if we're in the car, it just escalates so quick. Just the other day, I was trying to navigate whether or not I should call somebody on my Apple Watch, which I wear like a life alert bracelet so that I can call for help for both she and I. And I didn't know what to do. And I was trying to make that choice. And she got so aggressive that I took her out the front door, which is not normally my move because we can't like assist a runner in getting out, But I had to like change everything, the environment. I had to just switch everything on a dime. And my neighbor was in her front yard, which is lucky for me. When Celie picked up the only thing that she could, it was like a chapter book size rock, and she threw it at me. And my neighbor immediately came over. I mean, just this is our life. Like this is the life that we have, and it isn't something I can hide any longer. Mm. With that, I think it's important. I know we're going to go long on this one, but I really feel like it's important to tell our listeners that if this is your life, and your kid has that Hulk strength, or those black eyes, or that charging you down a hallway, or that chase a sib or hurt a stranger. These are the things that we've found to be helpful. Does anybody have any tips?
Well, I told my neighbors on both sides of me and behind me, you're going to hear sounds you've never heard before. I just want to let you know everything's fine.
Yeah.
Everything's fine. I actually remember, real quick, that I had this really nice older Italian lady that lived next door, and there was an episode. I mean, it was pretty bad, and like she got outside and it was a lot of yelling. And a couple hours after, when we were in and settled, she came and she knocked on my front door, and I opened the door, and she stood there, and she hugged me. And you know me, I'm not a hugger, and I literally fell into her, and I was just sobbing. And she said nothing. She said nothing. That was it. And I was like, literally no words were spoken, but it was just very loud.
That is exactly what you need to do.
Yeah.
I mean, that she gets it.
Yeah.
Give a
I
hug.
would send her a cannoli if I could.
Oh, she's amazing.
Send me a cannoli.
Jamie will take it for Tina.
I think my only tip, I mean, like figuring this stuff out is there's no answer is the real thing. There's no answer to how to navigate this stuff. But I think what I've learned over time is like, I mean, we're so tuned into our kids, you can feel a shift of energy coming, you know, like there's certain cues for any type of dysregulation for both of my kids. And it's individual to each one of them, but if we're out somewhere and I feel this mood shift, we are exiting. I don't care what's happening. You know, we've had to leave therapy, we've had to leave meetups with people. We haven't gone places because we got to the car and it's like no thank you. We're not gonna make I mean that there's no point in this right now because it's just gonna be terrible. But that's okay. I mean, it just makes the situation worse and no one's going to have fun, and there's no point in forcing like a dysregulated kid to do something that is on the docket, you know what I mean, including therapy, which I think sometimes that portion of it's really hard because you have all these rules for canceling therapy or expectations that you're going to make your appointments or whatever the case may be. But if your kid's not sleeping and they're dysregulated and the energy is shifting, there's no point in the therapy anyway because it's just going to be a mess, you know. You don't want us coming because there's no therapy that's going to happen. It's just going to escalate the situation. That's the only thing I've learned so far.
At what cost?
At what cost
Yeah.
for everyone involved. Like I don't want my kid to get to 10. That's terrible for them, and it takes sometimes days to reset that situation. And then also like just the physical nature of what that experience is going to be paired with the emotional nature of it. Like at this point both of my kids are pretty big and I'm 5'2", you know, and it is getting harder and harder to navigate carrying them or moving them or getting them anywhere at this point for me. So I've just learned that like our life consists of saying no sometimes, and that's okay. Don't let people make you feel bad about it.
So you don't think that's why the aggression happens. Tabitha means she's telling the others no. She's not telling her dang kids no.
No,
she is saying, I hear you, we're going to tell them no.
No doesn't exist at our house. But
not that kind of no,
we do a lot of look at this instead.
Yeah.
Redirect.
I will say the other thing too is like sometimes I can look at our week and I can be like, okay, we have 10 things happening. By Friday, it might be a mess here because we have so much, too many transitions, too many, activities, whatever the case may be. And I've learned that over time too. Like I used to try and do so many more things all at once, and I didn't realize that was what was causing the elevation of whatever was happening. Yeah. And really with aggression, sometimes you don't know. You just don't know. You don't know why it's happening. You don't know what your kids are feeling. You don't know what caused it. Sometimes you can look back and be like, oh, it was X, Y, and Z. Sometimes you're just like, fifth of the wind. Who knows?
Yes.
And you just make your way through those situations. But tips wise, it's really, really incredibly hard to figure out how to navigate those big feelings. It just like there's no real answer. And I think sometimes it's just making your way through all of it and then coming out the other side. Yeah, coming out the other
Surviving.
side.
Yeah.
I
Because
mean,
it really depends on our kids.
Yeah.
And where they are in that moment.
yeah.
Because-
Where we are in that moment.
And where we are in that moment. Yeah.
Yeah, because
So
you have
there's
to
not
think
like
about,
this,
yeah,
playbook on it.
no, and you have to think about like if your kid's not sleeping, you're not sleeping.
Right.
If your kid's dysregulated, have you had the opportunity to eat or have a glass of water or sit down for a moment
Or wine.
yeah, or if there's safety issues going on, like I think Rachel was 100% on point with this, with the control of the situations. Like we control so many things in order to prevent the shift in energy.
Yeah.
Like the exact toy has to be there or whatever they're anxious about at that moment. You're trying to like soothe the anxiety.
We regulate the variables as well
Yeah.
as our kid and the environment and ourselves. We have
Well,
to.
what does Carrie Cariello say? That she didn't realize how much, I'm not going to word this properly, when Jack went to his residential schooling, how much they fed off of each other's, I can't, energy,
They matched each other's energy.
yeah, she talks a lot about that. And it's like,
Mhm.
yeah, you just always have to be on. There's just always, and you
And
just
there's so
never
much
know when it's
preparing.
going to happen.
Yeah, there's so much preparing. There's so much talking about things. There's so much, steps that you have to take, trying things to see if they'll work. Like it is kind of mind blowing the capacity of that control and, why we're often anxious about things happening because there is
Hashtag
so much.
always.
It's us.
Because
anxious.
you are trying to control the mood of your child or the energy of your child or the comfort of your child, the environment that they're in, your energy. Like my kids feed off my energy immediately. There's no showing of certain types of emotions in my house because it will elevate all of us. Everyone in the house will get elevated.
Well, Tabs, I wouldn't
for me.
know about that because I keep it calm and cool and collected at all times in this house.
It is
Basically,
hard.
you're
Yeah.
steady
We're
Eddie.
there.
Basically.
Pretty
But you're right,
mindful.
Tabitha. Our kids definitely feed off.
I feel like we meet the highest energy and we're all regulated or like all conditioned to do that. So that can just be like a giant building situation. What
And
about you, Jane?
you're turned off, sometimes you're turned off so much that you literally can't breathe, because you're so turned off by controlling your own demeanor and energy and all the other things that you just like.
Meaning like shut down, turned off.
Yeah, like because you can't be frustrated or not that you can't, but it just elevates the situation. And so you try not to be because or like sad or fearful or like any of those emotions oftentimes can elevate,
Well, I remember when I started, sorry, Jane, writing about it a little bit, just started kind of writing about it. My boss said to me, "Oh, that's where those bruises came from." And he said it very sort of flat, like it wasn't like he didn't make it, he's like gently, like, oh. So yeah, that he mentioned that about the bruises. Anyway, sorry, James, what were you gonna say?
Tips for me, I mean, obviously when they're really young, a lot of times when they're young, I think it's such a big communication thing and them just not understanding the world in the way that I think a lot of typical kids can grasp onto. And so really helping them navigate that. The hard thing about that, most people listening probably are past that because none of us knew our kids were autistic when they came out of the womb, but figuring out whatever form of communication you can, I know has probably helped all of us. It's helped in the ways of like lessening it. It does not make it go away, but it does help with that frustration they're feeling towards those things. So a big tip for really younger kids is figuring that out. And then for us, as we've gotten older, it's Rachel's talking about like staying ahead and basically being all knowing, which isn't possible, but it's really getting to know your kid, which I talk about this a lot. Like I know my kid on a very emotional level, but I don't know, like just found out recently what my son's favorite color was because he's not very good at talking, like things like that where I can look at my son and I know when it like something's up, it's coming, we got to get out of here, like Tabs was talking about. Getting to that place has helped us a lot. And this all sounds easy and it's not at all, and I was never great out of it, but like really writing down like, okay, this happened today, what happened before that. I think like we all get stuck in that moment, and even if it's like the one thing leading up to that moment, whether it's like they dropped a cookie or there was a loud noise or something like that, but normally it's they've built up that energy to that place. And so like we would write down and be like, okay, what happened in the hour before this? Why is this happening? And again, sometimes you just don't know. A lot of the times we just don't know, but looking for those patterns and figuring out how we can avoid those things if we can, and without like always giving in. Because now that my son's older, I will say a lot of the stuff comes from normal child things, like things he wants, or why is the control? Why is this not going the way I want it to go? When he can't understand that and grasp that, it comes from a lot of that. And a lot of the times it's like, buddy, I know that you're pissed about this, but you can't react in this way. And so it's also like building those tools and implementing those tools in that beforehand when you see it coming, because we all know when you're at a 10 and someone tells you to calm down, you're only going to a 15. You're not coming down.
Telling you, never forget Jackie saying, when she's in that state, get out of her face and stop telling her to breathe.
Yeah. They're done. Yeah. No, all the breathing and meditation you've worked on is not going to work in that moment, but really like giving your child those tools. And I will say Jesse's gotten really good at a lot of those tools. Like we're kind of hippy dippy Coloradans. Like we do yoga. My kid drinks kombucha for breakfast every morning. Like we're like, so Jesse will be doing a meditation and he'll be like, okay, breathe in, breathe out. It's the cutest thing in the world. Like, because that's been his whole life. And so setting up those codes. And again, all of this sounds like I'm just like, oh, just do this. We still have issues. It's still really hard, but those are the things that have helped us, I guess. And it just sucks. And when you're in that moment, I've gotten to a place where like, for a while, I was really trying to be like, okay, let's stay calm, which is not me at all. I'm not like, not nice. What's the word? Like a mom who's like, okay, everyone, let's like, but now
we're not using only gentle parenting techniques.
Yeah. I'm not gentle. That's a good, I'm not
gentle parenting.
I'm not gentle and gentle, but like we've gotten to the point now where my son and I are getting older, but he starts building up and I'll be like, you need to chill. Like I literally say that to my kid.
Yeah.
And that has helped more than like me trying to like,
because he knows that expectation and you're limiting your words.
And like I'm not, limiting my words. I'm not getting too much, and I'm not talking down to him. I'm not like, okay, little baby, you need to chill out. Like, I'm just like, hey. And sometimes that helps and sometimes it doesn't. But it's just like getting to know your child the best you can. And you know better than anyone. And like, all the therapies in the world. And I know a lot of people do behavior therapy to try to help. And like, if it gets to a place that that's not working or that seems like too much and something else is working, then do what works for you. Like, and it's always going to change. Your kid's going to grow older and the reasons might change why they're doing what they do.
And I think the language is that's a good tip, because like learning about emotions, like I was saying, I'm turned off a bunch of times, but the other day I was getting really frustrated. Freaking Hot Wheels. I can't put that shit together. I mean,
they suck
this
now.
is not
when we were kids, they didn't fall apart.
Oh, it's horrible. So anyway, we pick up this Hot Wheels set, turns into complete chaos because mom sucks at the Hot Wheels and I can't get it together fast enough. And the loopy thing won't do the loopy thing. And so everyone is a hot mess. It was a disaster zone. Everyone was pissed off about the Hot Wheels. But I was getting frustrated, and Nixon could tell I was getting frustrated. And I'm like, I need to take a break from the Hot Wheels. Mom is getting frustrated. And he looks at me and he says, you should probably take a breath, take 5 minutes. So the tools that we're like trying to teach him to self-regulate, he was feeding back to me.
Hey, you want to try one of these, Mom?
Are you, well, and he asked me, which was pretty fascinating. He said, are you mad? And I said, no, I'm not mad. I'm frustrated with the Hot Wheels. This is what's happening. This is what I'm feeling right now. And then he said, okay, well then you should take a breath if you're not
But I
mad.
think that's also really good is being open with our kids about
Yeah.
Jesse's favorite, like, so he has started speaking a lot more recently, which has been amazing. But in general, he's very, very limited, like 3-word sentences. But we would be like building up, like getting frustrated at something, and he would turn to like me and my husband and be like, "Stop being frustrated," because that was like became his favorite word. But we've always been very open with him about us dealing with our emotions and
Yeah.
trying to like not hide that I get frustrated or that I get pissed. I'm not gonna hide that anyway. But him seeing us deal with that
Acknowledging
and
it.
hopefully working through it. I'm not
Yeah.
always really good about that. Sometimes it's me walking out of the house, but like, hey, mom needs space. I need this.
Yeah.
And when you need space, that's totally okay for you to take that
Mhm.
space or
Yeah.
the break.
Well, when I was talking about being shut off too, I'm talking about like the level 10, when things are off the complete rails and you have to be turned off and kind of like stoic is usually the way that
Yeah.
but them understanding, like if you're sad or if you're happy or whatever the case may be, like being able to explain those type of emotions as they get older, obviously, like Nora's bracket. I mean, it's just feelings all the time right now. But she's hearing what we're saying to Nixon most of the time, and he's obviously been taking it in for a long period of time because it takes a long time to explain those complicated concepts. But it does help. It does help for them to have language, even if they're yelling. I'm frustrated or I'm mad or whatever. At least you know that there's some kind of explanation or they can understand what they're feeling in some sense,
Have them
Aya
flip you off.
understands it now. She says she'll say something or sort of start to do something and then she'll say, "Don't you dare."
Don't you dare.
But again, with all that, it's like whether or not your child can speak or not, it's trying to show them those things when they're not, like Tabs was saying, not when they're at the 10. That's not the time to be the example.
Don't be the example.
A lot for me, I'll admit I'm not the best. I do it, especially when we're in public. I'm really good about like being stoic, not having reactions to things because that does help. But man, it's hard, especially at home. I'm not good at it. I have to walk away. If my husband's home, I'm like, you got to take over. I can't.
I don't know who said it earlier, but the worst part is when your child hits you in public. It is, I can feel my face. I can feel people staring at me. I can feel it like going through my bones because people don't understand it.
Well, you just hear all those things you've heard before, like I would never let my child do that, or that mother, like criticisms, like you guys talked about this before, but criticisms on your parenting, criticisms on your child. It's all built up into a moment where you are also like just been hit
naked and afraid. I mean, you are just so vulnerable. Everybody's vulnerable.
I agree with everything that Jamie said in regards to like all the tools in the box and all the behavioral stuff, trying to like figure out like the trigger and stuff like that. It's a lot different too. It really depends on, I think, where your child is with comprehension and with language. Obviously, what's going to work with Jessie is not going to work with Alyssa because she doesn't have the understanding. It's just not there. I think one of the most important things is to just really give yourself grace. Like, let yourself it's okay to be angry. Like, it's okay to be upset about it. So okay to be, mad in the moment and mad at the situation. And really, I think trying not to take it personally. And this is a really hard thing. It doesn't sound like it's hard, but it is. It's hard for the other children. It's hard for the parent, they're not doing this on purpose. And I think it's just like really keeping that in mind and really trying to zero in and figure out what triggered them. And like everyone else said, sometimes you just don't know. You're just not going to know sometimes, especially if you have a child without language. And even if your child does have language, if they're escalated to that level that they're lashing out and being aggressive, they may not have those words to explain to you what's going on. You just have to be so in tune with your child, and just to really take a step back and try to figure out what one of Alyssa's things, like we figured out it was Kara. It's always Kara. When Kara was born, she was fine. She let her exist. But when she started getting mobile and walking and kind of getting into her space and her stuff, that's when some of Alyssa's behaviors resurfaced. And I think whenever a child whined or cried, it like really just triggered her because it made her like realize Kara, because 1-year-olds, it's all they do is whine and cry, it took us a long time. It took us a really long time that we eventually figured out that was the trigger. And once you know what the trigger is, then it just makes it a lot easier to navigate that stuff. But yeah, like just to allow yourself, those feelings and to process them. Like, you're not a bad parent because you're upset about it, or you're angry. Like, it's perfectly natural. Like, if somebody hurts you, that's not fun. Like, you know what I mean? Like, and finding someone that you can talk to, like whether it's your partner, your mom, your sister, another mom with, who's going through the situation, same situation or similar situation, like it really helps just to be able to talk about these things and not be judged. And I think that's what most of us really need, because like Tabitha said, like there's not a solution. There's not something that's gonna make your child be aggressive better, because some people go through all these steps and at the end of the day, their child's still aggressive. So
Hmm.
some of these strategies do help, and sometimes it's a phase, and sometimes, there's a change or there's something they're reacting to. And sometimes you can go through all these things and it doesn't help, or, maybe it will just decrease but not go away. So sometimes I feel like just finding somebody who can understand is the biggest help that there is. Knowing that you're not alone, knowing that your child is not the only child who does these things, I think really, really helps. And, and
That
give your
frees this
child,
a part of your soul that
yeah. And give your child grace, I think, too. Try to start over with a fresh slate the next day or the next hour or whatever it is. Like, try to let go of everything and just, reset. And again, that's not always easy.
I agree completely. I feel like I use these fake tools like an opposite superstition, like a Flannel superstition. Okay, Rach, you're taking a break. I just remind myself everything is temporary. Like by break, I mean like I might have closed myself in the bathroom while she's still thrashing in a hallway or whatever. So long as she's not hurting herself and like safety is considered. If I can get a second, I remind myself that it's temporary, that this next sip of water that I am going to swallow is going to wash away the feelings that I have of inadequacy. I'm going to not judge myself that I can't get control of this. I'm not going to be mad at her when it's over and she needs a hug. I'm going to stop my forehead from sweating because it's making me too slippery to hold it together, like, or, grab my hands. Like, just I try and talk myself through it when I'm not talking her through it, or so that I don't talk her through it. Because less words is so important, like so important for us. I've done a lot of searching and asking and looking under rocks for any training for myself for the big stuff. Like in my life and in Celi's, restrictive holds have been an important part of keeping her safe or getting her safe in various environments. And it's really shitty. I begged people at the school, at the police station, at the crisis team to teach me how to do holds. And it ended up being that we went back to an ABA center that she had had some services with, like OT and speech and stuff, and asked that they do like a crisis training for us and teach Celia how we are going to hold her body when she can't control her body, and what it would feel like when it's mom alone, and what it would feel like when it's mom and dad or two teachers, and why we're using those tools to keep her safe and what the goal is. It's to hold her body safe when she can't, and to get her to an environment where she can be safe when she isn't. It's really hard. Like it's hard to emotionally go through. It's hard to have to know those things. And then there's meltdowns that only get to a point where you need to de-escalate through a different set of tools. Like it's hard to not feel like it's going to go there every time. We have a crisis plan in place. Earlier I mentioned that I wear an Apple Watch. It's sort of like in case shit I can call from anybody, I can call anyone. We have had to do a lot of really things that I would not have thought to be normal, like video meltdowns that are so intense that you can't imagine. Because later that might be the only example I have of what it looks like when she was 5, or the only example of what it looks like when she was 7. So that when she's 13 and I'm trying to describe it to someone like Kennedy Krieger, that we have a record of what this has been like. Taking notes, copious notes, helps. It helps to free it from my heart and my soul, but also to validate exactly how that happened. Whether it's she left the building or hurt somebody, like whatever it is, I taking notes kind of frees me. The girls have talked a lot about like having someone that understands, and whether that's for us, someone at this table, or all of us, all of the table. But also, I have my dad, who's someone physically, locally, that at least understands that this is happening behind my closed doors. Billy and I, as I shared in a recent episode, are going through a divorce process. And this is one of the major topics of our plan in protecting Seely in every way and caring for Seely. This, sort of these crisis plans around aggression. The neighbors is a great tip. The cops and building and fostering those relationships when it is not at level 3000 has helped to support us when it is.
I want to second what Tabitha said, and I think it's a learned skill. I learned that if she was in a place that I knew was not going in the direction we needed that day to go into, it was okay not to go somewhere. That I finally started to feel I'm setting her up to fail. She is not going to do well in this place, and then it's going to happen. So
yeah. The other thing too is we met because we were writers. We have a lot of friends that we've had episodes with that are writers. You could find pieces from many of those authors that really talk about the heart and what happens to your family when these things are happening. Giving yourself grace and really understanding that, like, doing your best and it still being brutally difficult, exhausting day after day, failing again and again, it never feeling like it's going to end or get better, is all stuff that happens to your heart when you're pushed to this extreme. And knowing that that too is in some way temporary allows me to breathe and at least think that I might be able to get up for air sometimes too. I don't know. This is really, really hard stuff. And I want to invite our listeners as we sort of close this up tonight. I want to really invite our listeners that if any of these topics have validated your life or story, whether it's the Hulk strength briefly mentioned, or a safety in the car, or you're terrified to go to Target. If any of these parts of this episode have hit home for you, please feel free to share this episode to any of your people to sort of give them a look into what autism is like behind closed doors, because it's like this and more for many of us at one time or another.
For anyone going through this, we see you.
Yeah.
We know how hard it is. You're not alone.
Our next episode is going to be another heavy one. It's about eloping. And following that, we're going to talk about some self-harm. So it's going to be a really heavy series, but we really just want to make sure you understand you're not alone. Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.
bye.
Thank you.
Thank you for joining us at the table for this episode of the Table for Five No Reservations podcast. Big thank you to all of our supporters. If you'd like to become a supporter, please check out the description of this episode. There you can also find episode information. If you enjoy our podcast, we would appreciate if you could rate and review us wherever you listen. Join us next Monday for more, and while you wait, check out our content on Facebook and Instagram. If you'd like to contact us, you can at tablefor5podcast@gmail.com. We can't wait to sit with you again. See you next time. Bye.